I know what you're thinking. With Nintendo releasing a bunch of new Nintendo Switch Online games, and a majority of them being Japanese titles that, well, never came to America, you're probably thinking that this is gonna be a boring episode of the review crew. But you're wrong! Believe it or not, we actually have a lot of reviews to go over, and not just for one game. But hang on, let's not bury the lead here. Because this week, Nintendo is giving Nintendo Switch Online subscribers a quartet of 16-bit classics. I'm talking about Kunio-kun no Dodgeball, Big Run, the Supreme 4-Wheel Drive Challenge, Cosmo Gang, the Puzzle, and the brawler team-up we've all been waiting for, Battletoads and Double Dragon. Now, that's exciting news, but are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Hyper, Super Play, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So get ready to dodge those balls and team up with the Toads in this action-packed episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Pac-Attack!
Long before anybody in the West knew about Kunio-kun or his shared universe of games, there was Dodgeball on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was great, especially if you played with friends. 4 years and so many Kunio-kun games later, Super Dodgeball returned. Yeah, at least in Japan. Kunio-kun no Dodgeball Dayo Zenin Shuugo, which translate to the much catchier "It's Kunio's Dodgeball, assemble everyone," gives us better graphics, more detailed levels, and even more over-the-top dodgeball moves. Yeah, it's more of the same, and definitely not a very ambitious sequel. But let me tell you, it plays a lot smoother than what we had on the 8-bit NES. Plus, it has a song that's just a straight-up copy of one of the Beatles' biggest hits. Would this have been a big hit in the United States back in 1993? Maybe. But I'm just happy that this long-overlooked Kunio-kun classic is finally getting a release in the West. If you grew up loving Super Dodgeball, then assemble! Because even though we don't have any English language reviews for this game, I still think you're gonna have a lot of fun with this Japanese import. In the arcade, Big Run was a surprise hit. Not only was it rendered in 3D, but this Jaleco racer was the first to be set in the Pac-Attack Rally Raid, which allowed it to stand apart from the stiff competition from Sega and Namco. 2 years later, when it finally hit the Super Famicom under the surprisingly wordy named Jaleco Rally Big Run, the Supreme 4-Wheel Drive Challenge, it failed to drum up the same interest that you saw with the arcade version, partially because it just never was released outside of Japan. Normally that would mean that we don't have any reviews to talk about, but that's not the case here. Perhaps assuming that Big Run would be making its way west, Electronic Gaming Monthly actually reviewed the Japanese version in their 25th issue. They were not impressed. Giving it an average score of 4.5 out of 10, they summed it up this way. Based on the arcade hit from Jaleco, this translation of the coin-op driver features dazzling effects and pedal-to-the-metal racing action. Big Run takes a different approach to the driving theme because it doesn't use any of the special graphics modes for its first-person effects. The most impressive part of this title is the unique manner in which jumps and other special maneuvers are depicted. There's even a night scene in which the only part of the road you can see is illuminated by your headlights. While the graphics tend to be a little choppy, the game has a nice variety of features and is a new addition to the driving theme. Alright, that's not great, but wait a second, because Ray's also reviewed the game and, well, they liked it. They gave it an 89%, noting that the arcade game wasn't all that well known in the UK. The Famicom conversion is superb. The intro screens are good, and they use some fantastic visual effects. The sprites are similarly impressive, with massive cars, all of which are very detailed. As you'd expect, speed isn't a problem for the Famicom, and the race zooms along at an alarming rate, although it's not as smooth as F-Zero. The sound is sickeningly smooth and full of crystal clear sample effects. You even get a different piece of music for each stage. Most importantly, the difficulty level is pitched just right, ensuring you'll race well into the night. Oh man, is this really one of the great 16-bit racing games? No, it really isn't, but it is worth a look, especially now that it's on the Nintendo Switch Online. You would think that if Nintendo was going to bring Namco's Cosmo Gang series to the Switch, they would start with the first game, a 1991 shoot-'em-up that was called Cosmo Gang the Video. But apparently, Nintendo thought a better way to introduce the series to Western audiences was with a competitive block-clearing puzzle game. I'm not sure I agree with that decision, but here we are. Now, in case you're looking at this game and it kind of looks familiar, you may know it as Pac-Attack, a reworked and reskinned version featuring our favorite dot-eating Ghostbuster. If we were reviewing Pac-Attack, then let me tell you, we'd have a whole bunch of reviews to choose from. Sure, they'd mostly have middling scores and the critics saying, "It's fine, I guess," but at least we'd have a bunch of reviews, plural. Sadly, only one English-language magazine decided to review this Japanese puzzle game. That magazine was Super Play, and they were not impressed. They gave it a score of 58%, which makes this their 444th highest scoring game on the Super Nintendo. As puzzlers go, Cosmic Game is a pretty good one, but the lasting interest plummets quite swiftly, and it's a bit expensive for an occasional time filler. Slick, colorful puzzle with a high novelty factor. It doesn't push you or your Super Nintendo, though, and is ultimately cupboard fodder. Yeah, it's kinda odd that they gave us Cosmo Gang instead of the more recognizable Pac-Attack. But hey, don't let that stop you from checking out this cute little puzzle game.
よし、エネルギーを盗んでこい。
地球は君の腕にかかっている。5分の満点ゲームコズモギャングズとカンカンカーニバル。
The 1990s were full of big IPs going head-to-head, like Alien vs. Predator and RoboCop vs. the Terminator. But Battletoads and Double Dragon holds the distinction of being the ultimate team-up. Although it may seem a little weird to combine the cartoony world of the Battletoads with the more grounded beat-em-up streets of Double Dragon, this crossover works surprisingly well. The game really does a good job of mixing elements and enemies from both series, showing you just why the franchises were popular in the first place. It's not perfect and definitely not very ambitious. But you know, I've always had a soft spot for this weird bearing. Did the critics agree with me in 1993? Well, the answer to that question depends entirely on which magazine you trust. Because let me tell you, the scores were all over the place. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that this is one of the most polarizing titles that we've ever covered on the Nintendo Switch Online. Let's go ahead and start with the magazines that actually liked the game, beginning with the Super NES Buyer's Guide, who gave this team-up a surprisingly high score of 90%. Howard notes that it all started with a simple NES game that has been made into one of the best all-time action carts. The combo of Double Dragon and the Toads seems funny at first, but it's a great team that adds excellent variety to the game. With great graphics, cool sounds, and tons of playability, this is one winning twosome. Mike agreed. Yes, the Toads are back, and this time with friends. Putting the Mean Green Three together with the Dragon Twins was a great idea, and this game does them both justice. Content-wise, this is identical to the NES version, but the graphics are excellent, as are the rockin' background tunes. Yes, move to this! As we go down the scale, we find GamePro give the game a solid 4 out of 5, while Die Hard Game Fan went a little bit lower with a 78%. Electronic Gaming Monthly was more impressed, going with a solid 8.2 out of 10. Yes, I will move to this. This is identical to the NES version with some differences, but the graphics are improved tenfold. Putting these two teams together was a great idea, and fans of both will not be disappointed. Yes! Now, it is worth mentioning that the game has a number of detractors. For example, Nintendo Power couldn't muster up anything more than a 3.4 out of 5. Hyper gave the game a 49% and offered up this question. So, apart from showcasing a host of animated Arnies, what's the point of this game? Well, I've played it at some length, and I'm still struggling for an answer. Neither Battletoads nor the Double Dragon series really set my universe on fire. And on the evidence of this, when you put two very ordinary games together, you simply end up with a game that's double ordinary. By combining the two games, the net result is that you get to choose from 5 rather than 3 characters, and despite what the manual might say, there's really not a stuck match between them. It looks okay, but of course, the animated stills of the game's intro are far superior to anything that's in the game. If you love these characters, I figure you don't. You may find something to recommend this game. I don't, I can't, and I haven't been as bored since the last time I watched synchronized swimming and dressage in the same day. Ugh, think that's rough? Wait until you see what Superplay thought of Battletoads and Double Dragon. Giving it a 37%, they called the game incredibly boring. You only need to hit the punch button and walk around for a while. There are no special moves that you can control, and the only variation in the combat comes when you meet a boss who requires you to jump as well as punch. And that's it. The dynamite throwing bits are pretty dreadful as well. You collect the sticks before they explode, then hurl them back towards the thrower. After a bit, you'll hit him dead on and he'll blow up, and that's it. Time for more boring fighting. Look, I get it. If you're not into brawlers, this game is not for you. This is 2 beat-em-up grades coming together to kick some ass, both in space and on Earth. If that's your thing, then definitely check it out. If you don't like brawlers, then this one's not gonna win you over. Yeah, it is that simple.
It's just video game reviews! Okay, last week Harley and I reviewed Ultra Enviroman. Whack to the curb. It has got to go. So today, we're gonna take a look at Battletoads. Rocket! That it is, I mean, they got Psycho Pigs and Turbo Thwacking. And with kick fighting, surfing, babe saving, how can you go wrong? Your kid's a freak for Battletoads and these other games from Trade West, Nintendo Entertainment, or Game Boy systems required.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. Now, before somebody points it out in the comments, I am somewhat biased when it comes to the Battletoads and Double Dragon game. You see, a couple of years ago, I worked on the trailer and marketing for the Retro-Bit re-release of the game on both the Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo. But hey, you don't come to these episodes for my opinion, right? Yeah, I didn't think so. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite 16-bit beat-em-up? I'm not talking about one-on-one fighting games, but rather straight-up brawlers. The type where you walk around and punch and kick, or maybe hack and slash. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to wrap up the week with a pair of reviews. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,